Good morning, good day, and good evening. Welcome to episode 183, I think. Yeah, that sounds right. Of Tech of a Tea. Welcome to the show. Today, we have a Cassidy James Blade on the show. Welcome. Some people probably know about the projects you've been involved in, but they may not recognize your name. They probably recognize your face if they see in your profile picture, because it's the same picture on every single platform. But let people know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Cassidy James. I am the partner success engineer at Endless OS Foundation. But people probably know me from, if you know me, you probably know me from a lot of other things in the past. I've worked a lot with the GNOME design team. I've had blog posts talking about free desktop standards kind of stuff. I obviously worked for quite a while, like a decade at elementary. I was at System 76 for a while. Back in the really early days, if you know me from a long time ago, I was like the super ambitious high school kid who wanted to do Ubuntu advertising because I was like, nobody's doing advertising for Ubuntu, so I'll do that. That's how I got in. It basically got into open source.
Okay.
It's a weird thing.
Well,
But yeah, so you probably know me from one of those things.
well, I guess we can sort of start there then. Like, how? So, I presume that you got involved, like you were at least interested in some sense before you wanted to do advertising. So, how did you even discover Linux in the first place?
Yeah, so the origin story. Yeah, I feel like I hear this exact story or some variant of it a lot of times, especially on Tech Over Tea. But uh, I think it started with Windows 95.
Okay.
Maybe. Windows 95 or 98, one of those. And so I'm the youngest of four kids. And so I had a hand-me-down computer, I think, from it was my mom's computer. It was like the computer we had. And then it was my older brother's computer, and then it was mine. So it was like running Windows 95, but it wasn't in 1995,
Right.
That's just what it was running. And it was an old computer. It wasn't connected to the internet at the time, I think. And I was just kind of poking around on it. And I discovered the world of themes. So it's kind of hilarious looking at where I am now, right? But I discovered the world of theming Windows.
Okay.
And I frequently would break Windows because you had to patch DLLs and stuff. It was a bad time. It may have been 98, Windows 98. It was one of those. But there were all kinds of stuff. You would get these shady, I guess we did have the internet then because I would download stuff.
Maybe not
it's all blur,
system connection, or maybe you're really slow connection.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had dial-up at the time.
Right.
Got that ingrained in my brain, of course, right? But yeah, you would download these shady EXEs off the internet, and they would probably have a virus, but they would give you a cool dock at the bottom of your screen, right?
Yeah, they also give you a cool dock. You just get a cool dock in your web browser as well.
Yeah, exactly. You get 17 toolbars, and you can't. Your internet browser's this tall because you've got all the toolbars. Yeah. Oh yeah, been there. And then evolved. I think I kept breaking it. My mom got mad. She would reinstall it. We upgraded it eventually. I think we had Windows XP on there eventually. And of course, my mom had an administrator account, and I had a non-privileged account.
Oh wow.
To install.
So your mom actually operate she was actually taking some interest in managing the computer.
Oh yeah, she was legit. She's who got me into tech originally.
Okay.
My dad's really smart in engineering, but more on the building engineering math that side of things. My mom is super tech nerd.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, because it's the exact opposite for me. My mom.
Yeah.
Literally, I had to teach her. I think I was 15 or 16 or something, how to send an email. Because all of a sudden her job required her to send in her what do you call it, a timesheet, the hours she worked, over email, and she had no idea how to do it. Previously, she would take it in on a piece of paper to the office, and she understood that. That was fine. She could print something, but email was not going to happen for her.
Oh yeah. No, my mom was the tech nerd, which is cool. I think it's cool. It was her computer. She did she had more of an office job. She did a lot of typing and stuff. She first time had a small business that she would actually do word processing and layout stuff for as a business from home. That was really cool because she some random business dude at the time who wouldn't know how to use a computer, which is weird to think about these days, right? A business person doesn't know how to. But I guess that was a thing. Or who didn't like to type. She would design their resume or whatever, type it up for them, and it was pretty cool. But so she actually got pretty good computers at the time. And then we would get them as hand-me-downs eventually, and they were garbage for the time, but
Sure.
it was the only computer I ever had, so it was awesome, right? My first computer actually ran Windows 3.1.1 and DOS, and so I learned the DOS command line to be able to play games.
Right,
Because,
that makes sense.
Pop
Yeah.
in the floppy drive and you got to navigate to the A drive. Yeah. So that was my first experience with computers. Really was DOS, and then you had to you had to load the Windows.exe program to get your Windows and stuff. But I had that computer around for a while because that was the one that was allowed to be in my room because it had no internet connection whatsoever. So my mom was like, whatever, and I don't care if it breaks.
Right.
You can just pop the floppy drive to reinstall whatever. But no, so I used this one was it was more of a shared computer that I used more than anybody else because I was around a lot, whatever.
Yeah,
but yeah, eventually I don't know what OS it had. Eventually it had Windows XP on it at some point. We had an internet connection. I would download these patched exes or patched DLLs of these random exes. Stardock was a thing. I don't remember. There was a theming engine you could install. It was a whole thing. And so we didn't have the Windows XP Media Center edition, but you could download a hacked version of the Media Center theme, which was different. And so you got the shinier. It was instead of the dull Windows XP, it was a shiny. It was Vista before Vista.
Oh,
it was really interesting actually.
Hmm.
Because it was XP was around for forever, right? So
yeah,
they actually it was almost like the Microsoft designers were experimenting with these new visual styles, but didn't give them to everybody. It was weird. There was a Zune theme that was it was dark gray and orange. It was Anyway, that was how I got into theming.
Right.
Well, my mom got sick of me breaking it. She told me I couldn't do that anymore, and so I had to figure out something else to do. And around this time, I heard of this thing called Linux.
Okay.
Specifically, this thing called Knoppix, Knoppix.
The name rings a bell.
KDE. I don't even remember the origin. I couldn't even tell you what it was based on. But it was. I just remember that was the first. That was my first Knoppix live CD.
It still is being
idea
released today, apparently. Or at least
based on Debian.
I've definitely seen this thing. I've seen this logo before.
But yeah, it's great.
So LXDE is what it has now, apparently. But
interesting.
I
thought it was KDE, which is what the Knoppix was from. Yeah.
Well, it probably was KDE back then. I don't think LXDE was around back then. When did LXDE come out? 2006. Maybe it would have been around. I don't know. Whatever. Probably KDE. Yeah.
But the important thing for me at the time, right, was the live CD part. So we had a CD drive, you'll pop out the CD drive. By the way, I downloaded a virus one time that would pop out the CD drive at random times.
Yep.
Cool. It was it was a Coca-Cola email attachment, and it was enjoy your free cup holder, and you clicked a button and it popped out.
Yeah.
It was so great. It's why could a random app downloaded from an email access your hardware in that way? We've come so far. But anyway, so yeah, my mom was sick of those viruses, so I had to find something that wouldn't mess up the system. And so the whole idea of Knoppix, or the idea of why I was attracted to that idea, was the live CD. So I could put the CD in, I would not install it, I ran it all off the CD and RAM, and that's how I used my computer. I turned the computer off, everything I did was gone. If I broke it, I rebooted it, and it was all back. It was actually, thinking now, this is the first time I've ever had this thought, it was kind of like having an image-based OS before image-based OSs were a thing.
Well, yeah, minus the persistent
the
storage,
CD.
at least. The persistent storage is kind of important, but sure, yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you could probably do something with a flash drive.
Oh, right? No, you definitely can.
Run the OS off a flash drive, then put your files on a flash drive.
Yeah,
run the OS off a CD.
I don't know how to do it with any Linux tooling, but I know with Rufus, you can just automatically, there's a slider. You can just be persistent storage, this much space on it, and it's just it just does it.
So I mean, in a way, it was my first experience with Linux was basically an image-based OS. So maybe that's why I like it now. But after that, I don't know. I mean, this was around. I think my first Ubuntu was 7.04.
Okay.
Hardy Heron, or is that 7?
Feisty Fawn is what it is.
Feisty Fawn. Yeah, that was a good one. That's a good one. Yep. 704. That was my first. So that dates it. It was probably relatively new. It was 2007.
We all love the brown.
And that's when all the browns and tans, and it's good stuff.
Yeah, I think they definitely look.
But
people can meme on what Ubuntu does nowadays with GNOME, but they've come a long way from the brown.
They
you
really
may not like the way it looks now, but can we just admit the brown was not good? Like,
it was. I mean, that was one of the first things I always did. Of course, coming from the theming idea, right? It's like, so I found this Ubuntu thing, and I think I liked the default GNOME interface better. Like,
okay.
that's really. And like honestly, the installer and stuff. I think at this time maybe I got my own computer, or like my mom was like, "Fine, we got a new computer. You can have that old one and do whatever you want with it." So I put Ubuntu on it.
Okay.
And but the first thing I'd go do is like go find like in the top menu, go to appearance, go to themes, whatever, like and change out to like one of the clear looks themes. It was different, like GTK2 stuff, good stuff.
Well, just adding things for Ubuntu would have been so much easier than whatever you were doing over on Windows.
Yeah. Oh, right.
And
yeah.
then
That's
making
right. I
your
was
own
like, this
themes
is
you wanted
incredible.
to.
I just can click a button. Like, and it's built
Were any
in.
of the nowadays, like, there are websites that have like giant lists of GTK themes. Were any of those around back then?
Gnomelook.org. Oh yeah, gnomelook.org. And it's still around. We just.
Oh yeah, I know it's still around. I wasn't sure it was around back then.
Yeah, it was definitely around back then, and it looked pretty much the same. I found it the other day. I was looking for a specific like screenshot of a mock-up.
Yeah.
And like I found the user, an old elementary designer who I haven't seen for years. And like I found their DeviantArt account and their Gnomelook account because they use the same username, and that reminded me of what their actual name was. And I was like, yeah. But Gnomelook, yeah, it looks exactly the same as it did. That's where we put the first elementary theme. It was on Gnomelook and DeviantArt. Those are the places you would go. DeviantArt, man.
I didn't know if people
it's still around too.
Yeah, no, it is still around. Yeah, I didn't know who would put.
It looks totally different.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I didn't know who would put themes on DeviantArt. I didn't know it was a thing.
Yeah, this was like I think it's this weird like I don't want to call it generational because it's like it's shorter than like an actual generation, but it kind of was this like generational thing where like there was this group of like younger kids basically. I mean, at the time I was a kid, like who were really getting into this theming thing, getting into this Linux thing, had zero technical knowledge, or at least in my case and a lot of our cases had like zero technical knowledge, but we loved the whole like post a cool mock-up and like throw together a terribly like photoshopped or gimped or inkscaped together like mock-up of an app, like cut off parts of the app and paste them back. We would do all that stuff, and like eventually people would create these SVG templates you could open in Inkscape and like do all these cool things. And that community, at least the bubble I was kind of in, was on DeviantArt. That was like, it's more similar to, and this is probably like not the cool hit place these days anyway, but like Dribble kind of became that of like for like Apple.
What in the world is Dribble?
It's Dribble with 3 B's. Dribbable.
Uh-huh.
I haven't been there for a long time either.
Right.
It was kind of like, it's what like I feel like the UI artists people went to after DeviantArt kind of, and like now it's probably like Product Hunt and like I don't know, somewhere else.
That's not a space I've ever personally been involved
hanging out with. Yeah, but it was that like I think the idea is like it really was these people who kind of had this idea for designing something cool or designing something that looked different, and Linux was like an implementation detail for us at the time. It was like that's what just lets us do what we wanted to do.
Right.
Like, if I could have done what I wanted to do on Windows at the time, I didn't have any philosophical reason I wanted to do it on Linux. I wasn't there for the philosophical thing. I mean, I watched your video recently about the like kind of the almost shift in like perceptions in the open source community, right?
Yeah,
like there's some people these days who don't have that hard like, oh, I'm here for the capital F free software.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of when I talk about that generational thing. It was almost that like, I'm not one of the young scrappy kids now, but like I feel like I'm of that kind of era of open source creators.
I hadn't even really thought of it, but like I guess it kind of is a repeat because you were saying that you weren't really there for the philosophical reason. You were there because it was the thing that did the thing you wanted to do, and that's sort of what's happening now with like the Steam Deck, where people are using Linux without thinking, like, it doesn't matter if it's Linux. 100%. It could be running Windows, it could be running macOS. Like, they just care about the fact that it's running their games and it's, doing it well.
And then, what's really cool about that, and what, like, it kind of echoes my story, too, is, like, then they stay around, right? They are attracted to this thing. It's like, I can play my games. It's a cool piece of hardware. It lets me do what I want to do. And they're like, oh, what's this desktop mode thing?
Yeah.
Oh, this is cool. Oh, there's a whole app store here? Oh, what are these apps? These are actually pretty nice. Oh, wow, I could install a different OS on my Steam Deck? Like, that's crazy. Like, they kind of, like, go down the rabbit hole, right? And so I love this idea of, like, oh, no, free meeting will end in 10 minutes. That's on me.
Oh.
I love Zoom so much. This is great. This is great. I think we could just create a new meeting and then just pick the conversation back up. That's
I
so
guess
terrible.
I guess we could do that. Sure, why not?
Wow. Do you have a Zoom Pro account by chance?
No, I don't have a Zoom Pro account.
Okay. I don't either. I didn't know this was a thing.
No, I didn't either.
I'm so sorry for the post editing you have to do for this too. I'm so sorry.
No, this is just gonna be fun. It's content. We have two options. We could use Jitsi, or do you have a Discord account?
I can use either one. Which is your preference? If Discord is easier for you,
Jitsi tends to be a bit weird on camera quality. Discord's probably going to be the least bad thing.
Okay.
We will pause for a minute and we'll fix this up. And we are back now. Okay. I didn't know about the free thing either. I don't use Zoom. The only time I use Zoom is when I have like businessy people on here. Like when I had some people from like the Cody project, they were like, "Let's use Zoom." I was like, "Sure, we'll use Zoom." And I don't ever choose to use Zoom.
I don't either. So I think I sent you the like original calendar link thing, and like it's just a feature that it says like Google Meet or Zoom, and those like the two things it supports by default. And so like that's just what it used, and I literally never actually use it. Unless I have, like you said, like there's some random like partner from an organization or whatever that's like, join this Zoom link, and I'm always like, fine. But it's usually not more than an hour call, or they hosted the meeting. And so I don't have the magical pro. I paid for it. Link, I guess. I don't know.
Well, whatever. It's fine. So we're talking about like new people joining the FOSS world, and then sort of building up the, I guess, what do you call it? Like the, how do you say it? The
like the philosophical stuff comes later.
That's the
right.
The philosophical
stuff.
Yeah. So
yeah. So
it's with the Steam Deck, everything.
With the Steam Deck, I think it's cool because it's. I do think it's like I have a lot of friends who are not Linux. I wouldn't call them Linux users, but it's like, well, technically they are, right?
Yeah.
Like they're using Linux on a Steam Deck. Like that's awesome. To me, that's so cool because it demonstrates that like this is like obviously Valve knew what they wanted to do for that. They could have done some like custom OS. They could have done some BSD thing. They could have, the Switch, the PlayStation, like they all have their custom OSs and whatnot. But no, they knew they wanted to do Linux, and like that's actually really good for Linux, just the engineering work that's going into that. But then it's so cool that it's like an on-ramp for those Linux users, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, Valve's always been a really like ever since what? When did the Steam machines happen? Whenever that was, like 2013 or something.
Yeah, that's a while back. Yeah.
Ever since that point, they've been like really like strangely focused on Linux for a company that makes that does what they do.
But does Windows games basically, right? Like
yeah. Like
they sell Windows games, like for the majority of things.
From my understanding, the reason why like Linux became an interest for them was when Windows 8 introduced the App Store, I believe, and they were worried it would become a system sort of similar to the Apple ecosystem where they would have to go through that, and Valve wants their cut, they don't want Microsoft to get their cut, so it's sort of a contingency plan, but nowadays they've actually got it to the point where it's like when they did the Steam machines, I've talked about this a ton of times, we're not going to get into it again. It was just a badly developed plan. Like the Steam machines, if Proton was a thing when the Steam machines happened, I don't think it would have been as much of a failure.
Yeah.
Like this is obviously the Steam Deck is a very different kind of device, but if the Steam Deck was just Linux native games, it would have failed like just as much.
Right.
But now they actually have this system where you can play pretty much everything, with the exception of a couple of Atlas games. A couple of Atlas games are a bit weird. Like Catherine doesn't play properly for cutscene reason. I don't know. There's some reason it doesn't play properly. And the malware made by Riot, like the anti-cheat system they use for Valorant League, things like that, because it's basically a rootkit.
Yep. And they're like, well, if you can't run the rootkit, it's like, well, what if we containerize the rootkit? They're like, no.
Yeah.
Because then there could be cheaters. And you can't have cheaters. Yeah. Yeah, I've got thoughts about that. I for a long time I played without getting too down that rabbit long time I played Destiny.
Mm.
I played the alpha when it came out on the PS3. We got, I didn't know it was a lot, I didn't realize it was that long ago until I actually like thought it out loud. PS3 alpha of Destiny, and then played the beta, played Destiny for a long time. And like what they originally pitched, loved the idea of this game. It looked like almost like a single player RPG, but your friends could jump in at any time. And just like, first of all, over the years, it just has totally turned into an MMO RPG, like with all the loot crate stuff and like whatever. I get that there are people who like that. I just don't have time for that. Also, I had 2 kids in the time from Destiny 1 to now. So like, I definitely don't have time for that now. Like, so yeah. And then, but I was like, man, if I could play it on Linux, I think I'd play it more often. Like, I've got a PlayStation. That's my like go sit on the couch and play machine. But like, you can play it every once in a while on a laptop or something, or on something like a Steam Deck. I think I would play it, but I just can't because they don't want me to. But that's okay. I played it on Stadia a lot, and I loved Stadia. Spicy take there. Stadia was amazing.
Was it? Are you actually being serious?
I'm actually being serious.
Okay, I want to hear you defend Stadia.
Okay, so I will not defend Google's decision making because nobody can do that.
Okay,
but
sure.
I will say the technology of Stadia to this day has been a better experience, at least for me on my connections, than any other remote play thing.
Okay.
Whether up to and including playing from a gaming computer or console on the same network to like an Android device or another computer.
Okay.
Like Stadia was lower latency for me on my like not even like gigabit connection, just like my 100 megabits or whatever that we had. Like it was lower latency to play a game on Stadia than it was to stream it from my PS4 or PS5. And like to me that's incredible. And they clearly, I mean, it's probably because they have YouTube Edge servers. Like that's the whole thing, right? It ran through the YouTube Edge server, so there's probably a server down the block with the YouTube data center or whatever. And like, but to me that was amazing, and I could see the vision, the idea of like, oh wow, we all thought Netflix streaming was a joke because nobody has all that bandwidth, and now look, everything's streaming, right? So like, I kind of saw, I was like, oh, I can see this vision of we're all laughing at the streaming idea because yes, not everybody has good internet. I mean, obviously, what we do at Endless, like that's a huge part. Like, a lot of people don't have any internet or have unreliable internet or expensive internet. So like, clearly, it's not like the only solution for gaming. But at the same time, the technology was incredible. I played before I could buy a PS5. I paid for Stadia Pro because I could get like next gen graphics on my current hardware for not that much money, and the experience was really good for me. So I'm bummed that they canceled it. I also think like the tech press kind of like sort of like was a self-fulfilling prophecy there. Like from day one, they were like, well, it's really cool technically, but I wouldn't get too invested because Google might kill it, and which scared everybody off, which meant that Google killed it. Like that's my opinion, but
I don't know. It's with Google killing a service, like you could definitely make that argument, but we've all seen killed by Google.com.
Like, yeah, like they have this terrible track record, obviously, but I'm not going to sit here and like defend Google and Google's decision making and organization, but like I just the spicy take, the summary is, I actually really love Stadia and was really sad when they felt it because like that was my next gen console. And I got a PS5 and I love it. But there are times when I'm like, I'm over at my in-laws house or like got decent internet and just have my phone, and it's like, I wish I could like just bang out a Stadia match or whatever now. And I tried it with like GeForce Now, and like this was not a good experience for me. Like it worked, but like it had way more hiccups and latency. Even trying it on my, like I said, on my local network, my PS5 with like my multi-gigabit LAN, like wired. I don't know if I was doing it to another wired device, but like wired to wireless, at least 300 megabits, whatever. Like, and it was not a great experience. So I don't know. That could be something with my network, but like I was just always blown away by Stadia.
I think the biggest problem that Stadia had was the way they did their game sales. The fact that like your Stadia games were like a whole separate thing. So
I can see it both ways. Like I can see the idea of like someone like me who doesn't have like a massive Steam library. Like I was fine.
That's what GeForce Now had. Was like a big advantage. Like it was just your games.
Yeah, and see, like I don't have a big library existing. So like the only like if Sony had, I mean they do have their streaming service, but it works differently. But like if I could play all my games I've ever bought on PlayStation anywhere,
Mhm.
then that would be cool. And like that's not quite what their streaming thing does yet, but I feel like they're kind of going that way. So maybe they'll save us. Maybe they'll save me for my random whatever. They're coming out with the like the two halves of a PlayStation controller bolted onto the side of an Android tablet. So that's exciting. I'm actually like really curious to see what they do with that.
When I first
Because I
heard about
might get one.
Like-
We'll see.
when I first heard about it, like I was streaming at the time, and my mod was like, "Hey, did you see the new Sony handheld?" I was like, "Is this like a?
It looks like a
Is
it
this
looks
like
like a
a
mock-up,
sequel
like
to
a joke.
Yeah, no, it's like, is this a sequel to the Vita?" And I saw what it was. Like, wait, so it's doing what your phone already does with their streaming app.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I have
How
a theory,
much is?
though.
Eh?
I have a theory.
Yes.
If so, they've advertised this, or they only talked about the streaming capabilities so far.
Right,
So they've
right.
talked about, oh, you can remote play, and I get like why they want to lean into that, like ecosystem stuff. But Sony also has a massive back catalog of PS1, PS2, PS3 games that could probably run pretty well in like a halfway decent Android device, like an
No, that's
emulated.
fair. Yeah.
And so if they actually shipped like the PlayStation Store on the phone, or on the phone, on the whatever they call it, the device, and you could actually run like natively or emulate it, but like offline and play the backlog of PS1, PS2, maybe even PS3 games,
You're not doing PS3
and
games.
you could stream. Yeah, probably not PS3.
You know, yeah, right now,
Yeah.
I obviously they'd be able to do like the emulation or whatever they're trying to do. Maybe like they could do streaming for PS3, definely.
Yeah.
Obviously,
But
they would
maybe
have
PS1 and PS2 even.
definitely
which would be
PS1
fun.
without a doubt. You can absolutely do PS1.
Yeah.
PS2, I think you're at the point where it's good enough on. Assuming it's like a high
Or
enough power
some
device.
games they could port rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
you know, like if they could actually port them and have them run rather than just emulating the whole thing. But like that's my like if they do that, I will probably buy one because I have a lot of PS1 and PS2 games that I really loved, and like until recently you couldn't even play them on the newer PlayStation consoles without just emulating. So that's I don't know. I'm holding out. I think it's like it looks ridiculous, and I think it could be a total flop and total failure.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, there's a little bit of me that hopes it's actually cool because I've always been a PlayStation player. Just that's just what we had as a kid, whatever. So like it could be cool. It could be cool.
With the PS3 stuff, obviously they'd be able to do like the emulation stuff better. They hopefully have documentation of how the hardware works.
You would hope.
But at least going by what like emulators right now are capable of doing, the main one being RPCS3, you need a at least a Zen 2 or newer CPU, a RX 400 series AMD or a GTX 900 series or newer, 8 gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah, they're not throwing that into a little Android handheld. So it'll probably stream for PS3, but still, it's kind of interesting to me. If they fix their streaming game, like maybe that'll be my successor to my Stadia love that I had for a while. Anyway, back. So Steam Deck. It's got way off the rails. It's fine. That's why I love these.
Fine,
That's why I love these. So that idea of people coming into the ecosystem, right? And they don't come here for the philosophical stuff, right? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would hate the fact that I'm like, oh, I use a PlayStation. Oh, it's proprietary, whatever. I'm like, okay, like it's what has my games, right?
Yep.
But it's when you can like take that and turn it into a Linux user or somebody who like you can introduce them not through the like I'm going to show you a wall of text about the GPL, why GPL is God or whatever, but kind of nudge them in that direction. I think it can be effective. Now these days I am like super passionate about free and open source software and like that. Like I don't think I'm ever going to write of my own will any software that's not open source. Like that's just not, because I've been exposed to this. I've like had that kind of slow burn of introduction to the philosophy and like why it's so powerful. And then I mean back in the day the theming stuff turned into I found this community of people building this theme called Elementary, the Elementary theme. And like I joined them because like cool, like I like it's pretty. I actually started using the Elementary theme on Ubuntu because that was what Elementary was in like 2007, 8, 9, whatever. Like it was a theme. It's an icon theme. The Ubuntu icons, the humanity theme was based on the Elementary theme. They actually contracted Danny to do that for Ubuntu. Like Canonical paid Danny to do the humanity icon theme, which is pretty cool. But then it, like, once you start designing like a theme and icons, then you're like, yeah, but like it's just a skin on top of these apps. I'm like, what if we made the apps actually better? And so then like that's where we started getting involved in making, like, we made a patched version of Nautilus that was just called Nautilus Elementary. It may have just been called Nautilus Elementary or something.
Okay.
But it was like a 4 patched version of Nautilus. And we didn't know what we were doing. Like, the code quality, I'm sure, was terrible. And like we dumped this patch on GNOME and we're like, behold, we have done it better than you.
Yeah,
like, please accept the stream. Because we knew, obviously we were better. And they were like, go away. Like, this is terrible. Like, this is not how you do things. And we were like, oh, they're so mean. They don't see progress. Like, we were those young, annoying people how the world worked. And like 100% we were those people at elementary. Like, and we learned, right? Like, we lived and learned, and we did the same thing with GTK at some point. We were like, oh, well, if we're gonna start making our own apps. And it was like in Python at the time, I think, because that's what somebody knew. So like we made our own apps, and we made the simple like calendar or contacts app, and like all these simple little desktop apps. We're like, because we're gonna make our own apps, because all the apps that are out there are bad. We're better. And it's like that hubris of a designer, and we 100% had that.
How old were you at the time?
I mean, this was high school for me. So
okay, that's fine then. I was gonna say
2010, I would have been graduating high school, which was like when we were really in the thick of like, I guess when we had decided we were going to make an operating system. Because obviously that's the next step that you do, right? You're like, well, we're making all these apps. We want to put all these apps together. And we were like, we could ship on Ubuntu, but the story for shipping apps was bad. Like, shipping apps on an OS was bad unless you like wanted to get them into Debian and then have Debian package them, and then they trickle into Ubuntu, and then Ubuntu package. Like, that whole world, we were outsiders to that world. And we were like, we just want to make an app and give it to people. And the only way you could do that in 2010 was to make an operating system. Like, the only reasonable way. So we made an operating system. So we made Elementary OS, and it came out in like 2011, I think, was the first version. And I mean, it was
31st,
right. We like,
2011.
yeah.
At least according to Wikipedia.
Yep. Remember that April Fool's has always been like a fun date for elementary.
Oh yeah, I guess time zone.
Like,
yeah, this could have. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think it technically was March 31st, but it was one of those where like then people heard about it on April Fool's.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Those elementary kids are making an OS, and we were like, I think we're like, our slogan was like, it's gonna be huge. And we were like, it was great. It was great. Like, I'm so glad we did it. But looking back, I'm like, secondhand, and I guess it's firsthand. I'm like secondhand embarrassed for past me. That if that's a thing that can be.
Was the Elementary OS website a thing back then? Because there might be some stuff on the Wayback Machine.
Archive.org probably has it.
Is it elementaryos.com? What's the website?
So it's elementary.io now, but at the time it would have been elementaryos.org.
Okay, let's see if we can.
I have a shirt somewhere in my closet that has that on the back. So
elementaryos.org.
Circa March 31st, 2011. I'd be like, it's gonna be huge. It was like a picture of Jupiter because that was the name. I actually saw if you go on DeviantArt, you can find mock-ups of the website that we posted on DeviantArt, because that was the whole world then. It was so weird.
That's one. But
yeah, we were like,
that's one thing I was going to look at. With the whole DeviantArt thing you're saying, there's still that sort of culture that exists now, but a lot of it is sort of shifted over to places like Unix Spawn, where I don't even actually are they still there? Because a lot of people left Reddit after the whole Reddit stuff.
I did.
At least up until like 6 months ago, that's where like all of that sort of custom desktop stuff was really being done.
Yeah. It probably shifted, I would say, a lot to Reddit. I don't know. I kind of exited that scene, I guess I'd say, like after because it's like what I was trying to make at the time was basically elementary, and so elementary was a thing, and so I just like did elementary from then on. Okay,
some of the images aren't loading, sadly. It's gonna be huge. Dexter, the only address book you'll ever need.
Yeah.
And in the list, it's or like the image they have here for like the address, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Amazing. Incredible.
I love this.
That's good.
This is great.
At one point the website said rock out with your dock out. Because we were talking about the dock at the bottom of the screen. That was the thing. We used the word sexy way too much. Nobody should use the word sexy as
Oh.
much as we used it. But we were like, ooh, we're edgy. We can say sexy.
Oh my
It was so embarrassing. Oh, it was so good. It was good times. But yeah, I would say like from there, like it actually like the evolution is actually pretty cool of elementary from there. Like
Mhm.
we had those early interactions with gnome people, and like at the time, I think our opinion was like, they're just these old farts who don't know whatever. Like they don't know what good design is if it slapped them in the face because we tried to drop our 5,000 line patch on them for their app and they just rejected it.
Was it
It's
like a 5,000
yeah,
line
like,
patch in one commit? Did you guys even
oh,
know how to use
probably.
Git?
Probably. No, I bet not. Like, I mean, at the time, to be fair, Gnome was probably like still patch files or something weird, but I don't know. I don't know. But I'm sure it was like we didn't follow any of the right ways to do it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
like, so it was that way probably for like 3, 4, 5 years until about 2015.
Mhm.
Like, we kind of had that like almost contentious relationship with Gnome for quite a while where
Mhm.
like, I wouldn't say like we disliked Gnome, but like we'd had in retrospect, this very, very like twisted idea of what our interactions with Gnome
Right,
were. But
right,
like in
right.
our minds as kids, we were like, oh, they're a bunch of jerks. And in 2015, I'll never forget, Shri Ram Ramkrishna is he's a gnome guy. If you know Shri, it's his username pretty much everywhere.
Mhm.
He invited Elementary to a GTK Hackfest.
Okay.
Interestingly, at the Endless headquarters in San Francisco in 2015.
Okay.
So Endless at the time had just kickstarted the Endless mission, I think, whatever their first computer was.
Mhm.
They just kickstarted an Endless computer. It was this weird like alien, not quite the little orb one, but it was the one that kind of like went up and like was funky. Kind of had some
Mission
like old iMac vibes.
Mission 1?
Like
I'm seeing videos from
it,
2017, so that might be a bit newer.
yeah, Endless. It could have been the Endless One,
Mhm.
Endless Mission, or Endless. They used a lot of the same names a lot, which
Oh,
makes it
okay.
very hard
Yeah,
to
okay.
find. Endless One 2015. I don't know. It's hard to find. But
Wait, Endless
yeah,
One.
whatever the weird alien like not orb but like taller one was. And it was like I think it was like an ARM processor.
Okay.
And this is like before Raspberry Pi either was a thing or at least was popular. And like the whole idea was really cool because they were like we're gonna make like commodity hardware
Mhm.
with highly performant software, which was GNOME, Linux GNOME, on and like it's gonna be you can plug it into a TV.
Mhm.
And so if you're in like a developing nation that you don't have like a computer lab you can go to, like you can actually get a computer for a very affordable price
Mhm. Mhm.
in your home. It was really cool. Uh, Anyway, so they had hired a bunch of people. They had like I think they had some VC funding or something, and they had also done the Kickstarter, and so they hired a bunch of people to work on GTK and GNOME. And so they were having a GTK Hackfest at the Endless offices, and Tree was like, "Hey, Elementary should come," because I think he knew that we had had like some like poor impressions of GNOME over the years or whatever, and he's like, "I think if you meet the people, you'll have a good time." And we're like, "Okay, sure, whatever." Like, I don't remember if GNOME paid for it, if they like sponsored it, or I don't remember. But regardless, like we made it happen. It was really cool. We met people. I met oh man, now I'm blanking on all of their names. I met all the cool people there. Christian Hergert was there. Emanuele, I think, was there. Emanuele Bassi and Cosimo. Shri was there. There were a lot of people. Jasper St. Pierre was there. Um, there were a lot of people like that were pretty big in Gnome, and like meeting them in person kind of changed, I think, my like honestly, I'll say it changed my life for the better. But also like I think changed Elementary and Gnome's relationship for the better. And
So sort of
changed
put it
Elementary
like
for the better.
a face to these developers. It's
Yeah.
not just a repo anymore.
I
It's
think
these are the people
yeah.
working on it.
I'm pretty sure Matthias Klassen was there, and I'm pretty sure Alexander Larson was there
Okay.
because we were also introduced to this idea. So in 2015, Elementary was like, we're going to have an app store, which is funny because it goes back to like, remember, like we were like, we want to put apps on Linux, and that was a hard thing. That was an impossible thing in 2010 when we started. And so 5 years later, we're like, we're going to build an app store. We have an OS. We've had a couple releases now. Like we're going to build an app store. So we were doing this thing called Elementary App Center. And the whole idea, we were like, the technology doesn't really matter. Like we can build it on Debian packages and it's fine. Like a lot of people are like, oh, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do it. Ubuntu tried it. It failed. It wasn't good. Like we're like, no. See, the whole thing is the technology
No,
doesn't
we're
matter.
gonna do it better.
We're going to do it better than Ubuntu did it, right? Because we've got that sweet, sweet space money.
Yeah.
Which we did. But yeah, but I mean, honestly, like looking back, we've gotten so much, like elementary got so much good press and good, like, I don't even know the right word, but like kudos, whatever, from like GNOME and Flatpak people, because they were like, you guys did it. Like you saw that you needed an app store before anybody else was actually doing it. Like Ubuntu had their thing and it was bad, and like payment methods were hard, and like packaging was bad, and like it was just this whole thing, and we found a way kind of to work around that. But interestingly, so we were just about to launch App Center, or we were working on App Center, and there was this talk at this summit, this Hackfest, whatever, about this thing called XDG app. And I was like, that's XDG is like cross desktop group, whatever.
Yeah.
Just kind of like free desktop. It's this weird, like not really a thing, but it's a thing. Yeah, XDG app. It was this thing. So we got a demo of XDG app. And we got this demo of this thing called OS Tree in 2015. And we were like, oh, that's cool. I don't know about it. It seems pretty far out. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. That'll be whatever. We're just going to do our thing. But like, we got the demo, right?
Yeah.
And so XDG app became Flatpak. And OS Tree is what Endless OS uses, and is what Fedora Silverblue uses, and is what GNOME OS uses or used until very recently. I'm not sure. Okay. They might be changing that, or they changed it recently. I'm not sure. But yeah, like OS Tree is a big thing, and Flatpak's a big thing now. And like we saw it early, and it was cool. Like it was cool to be there. But the people who were like, yeah, I built this thing. It's called XDG app. Like I think it's pretty nice. Like it containerizes everything, and like it keeps your host safe. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Who needs that? Like, and now looking back, it's like, I think the idea of portals existed at the time. So they were like, yeah, you'll have these portals interface, and so you can have more like permissions, more like we have a mobile OSs. And we're like, yeah, I mean, that sounds nice, whatever.
I think one of the problems we do have on Linux is there's a lot of really cool things being done, but developers are really bad at talking about it. Like
they are, like, yeah.
Like you're an exception. You're like actually good at talking to people, but like most people in this space are like, I'm doing this thing. It's cool.
I mean, okay. You look back to like that's how like Linux itself was announced, right? Which I mean, there's a flip side of like you don't want the hubris.
Yeah.
Like I think elementary like dipped too far into the hubris sometimes, right? Where we were like, it's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
But like I think we understood that like you got to sell it. Like even if you're making a free thing, you got to sell it. Like you really gotta show it off. Well, but I think people are like they don't want to like think too highly of themselves, which I also respect that. But
the thing with Linux at the time, though, like it made sense why 12 volts was so like I'm just doing this hobby thing, because at the time everyone thought that GNU's project that failed, why am I blanking on it? Herd. But everyone thought that Herd was gonna be the thing. They're like, Herd's gonna be here in a couple of years, guys. It's gonna be here. Mm-hmm. And then Linux took over as soon as it came out.
It's like, Linux is here, and that's a thing. Oh, cool, we can actually use it. Oh, cool.
It's like, we have a kernel that's actually working, and we also have this GNOME suite. We just
exactly.
bring them together.
Made sense, right? Yeah, sometimes that happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it was really cool being at that, like, that's one of the most, like, pivotal moments, I think, in my life. Because 2015, so that would have been... Oh man, I'm thinking back timeline. I can't even. My brain doesn't even work. But it was early enough. That's like when I think elementary got really serious about a lot of things. Like there was also when was this? Wow, my brain is so fuzzy about these things. At some point, we went to an Ubuntu Developer Summit or two, and that would have been earlier because it would have been it was like 2012 or something. Yeah, a little fuzzy on that, but like Unity, I think was a thing or was about to be a thing. I think it was a thing and it was going to be the default. So it may have been late 2011 because it was going to be the default for 1204, I think. So actually, that was quite a while before that. So that was another. I would say the Ubuntu Developer Summit in 2011. It was in Orlando. That was another one of those like pivotal moments for me, I think, where like we got invited, Canonical sponsored Elementary to come out to this thing, and like they recognized the value in what we were doing, which was really cool. And like we sat in the same room as like the designers working on Ubuntu and the developers working on Ubuntu, and a bunch of the GNOME people and GTK people were there because they got sponsored to come out because they were building Ubuntu. Like they were building the GNOME stack, Gnome's release cycle was based on the GNOME release cycle. Like Ubuntu's release cycle was based on the GNOME release cycle, and like they worked much, pretty closely together there.
Mhm.
And so it was really cool to be like in the room there and like talking to all those people and just like meeting all these people again. But yeah, and then I said 2015. So that's when we met a lot of Ubuntu people that were really
Mhm.
pivotal. And like, that's when somebody told us, a developer we respected, told us straight to our face, like, you guys have great ideas. Your code is crap. Like, may have been even harsher than that. I don't remember, but it was basically, you guys are great. You make great looking stuff, and your code is terrible.
Right.
And that was super pivotal for us because we're like, what, really? And he was like, you need to have code reviews. You need to have people who understand like object-oriented programming and like some basics of programming, because that wasn't our background at the time. Like, and that, like, we instituted code reviews. We really cleaned up. So that was really pivotal too. Of like, for a while we were just throwing whatever. Like, if it worked, it worked, and we didn't care about the code quality, right? And like, there's something nice about that. Like, you can experiment and do whatever, but like at some point, like, you have to, grow up a bit. So that was pivotal. And then 2015, meeting a bunch of the GNOME and GTK people and Flatpak people now, that was really pivotal. And like, then I think the next pivotal thing was the first GUADEC conference I went to. So in person, I went to oh gosh, when was this? It was 2017.
Okay.
But like, I'm literally pulling up my own blog because I'm like, I wrote about this, right?
I do the same thing in my videos. Someone's like, "Hey, how long have you been using Linux for?" I don't know. Check when my last video was.
Yeah, we went in 2018, but I feel like maybe it was 2018. That seems like more recent. But then I have to remember that was 5 years ago. But it still seems like it was a long time ago that we went to. Anyway, it was either that or we went to a different conference or something. But I walked in the door. And it was like the registration, like, go pick up your badge, whatever. And like, I didn't know anybody there. I think I was there before anybody else from elementary was there. So I was kind of like a little nervous. And Matthias, who I believe I saw in 2015 at the GTK Hackfest, he walked up to me and he goes, "Hey, how are you doing? How's elementary going? How are you liking the latest GTK 3 stuff that we've been working on? Like, is that working better for you? Is Granite adapting to some of this stuff?" Like, super knowledgeable about what we were doing, like, knew who I was, super inviting, immediately started a conversation with me, and was extremely friendly. And like, that totally shifted my perception of GNOME forever from then. It was just like, oh, there's somebody who actually is a really cool person, who really cares, who, like, I can tell doesn't just care about being like, oh, I'm going to go be friendly, but is like, no, I want to make sure that what I'm working on, what I'm spending my time working on, is actually serving you and your group of people who are doing this thing. And that, like I literally just got goosebumps again. Like, that totally shifted my whole perception of GNOME. And it was literally day one of me being at a GNOME event, and it was like, oh, okay. And then that kind of thing kept happening. Like, I kept meeting the people who were working on the thing, and they're like, "Oh, you're from elementary. Oh, cool. Like, hey," like, literally multiple times they're like, "Oh, you're the celebrity around here." I'm like, what? Like, yeah, we love the work you do. Like, we love your design stuff. And it's like, that's just so crazy. Like, that was really cool. That was so cool to see that, like, oh, these people are real people, and these people are like super friendly, and they're passionate about the technology and what they do, but like, they also care about the people behind it. And like, now, ever since, I've gone to several GUADECs, and like, that's my favorite part. Like, you get a lot done, you get really inspired, you see really cool technology, but the best part is the people. Like, it's so cool. It's like my group of friends from around the world that I get to meet up with, every year. Like, so it's like, that's the coolest part to me. And that changed my I think, elementary's perception of GNOME, of like, then our relationship from there was much more like collaborative. So it was like, I started working with GNOME design on some things. It's like, even though I was doing elementary, it was like, well, we have some design thoughts that we've put into this from the elementary side. Like, I'll share what we think, for GNOME. And like, they would be like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's really cool." And like, more and more, I think you saw some of that reflected in GNOME's design over time, of like, some things got a lot more elementary like over the years. And like, that's pretty cool that there's that cross-pollination. And like, at the same time, you can still have your own open source project that's your own thing, it's your baby, that's your vision. And you can still work really closely with these other people, and like
yeah.
the people who are building their own vision, but they're also building like the stack on which it's all built.
Mhm.
Like there's so much of GNOME that is under the hood of, you know, Ubuntu and Elementary OS and Endless OS and I mean Pop OS and like all these, even if they're not even shipping GNOME the desktop, like Elementary doesn't ship GNOME. We don't even ship the GNOME apps. Like it's there's like 1 or 2 GNOME apps that ship on Elementary OS, but it uses the GNOME stack. It uses GTK. It uses all the libraries. It uses all the investment and time and work that's gone into GNOME. And so it's still like a really important relationship to have. So I think that's like part of the beauty of what I discovered actually going to Guadalajara and meeting with people. It's a lot of cool people.
So obviously now, like, that's a big part of the reason why you're so invested in this side of it. But long before this, like, obviously you used Knopic at the start and then you used Ubuntu. Like, why was it that you sort of stuck with that GNOME stack side rather than going back to KDE or trying out, I guess, you know, at the time there wasn't really that many options, but like, why is it that the GNOME side is what you've sort of stuck with over the years?
That's a good question. I would say honestly, like, so I did play with Enlightenment. That was a thing at one point. I played with like very briefly because it was like flashy, and I did a lot of fun Compiz stuff at times. But that was like Compiz and GNOME.
Yeah.
You know, flaming windows, fold it up into a paper airplane and throw it, and like, yeah, you can still get some of that stuff as extensions on GNOME Shell, and it's terrible and it's great and I love it.
I saw one that was like a Rick and Morty portal. It's like when a window opens.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. There's great stuff like that. But no, so I mean, I played around with that. Actually, I think the first version of Elementary OS actually used Compiz because it let us do our like fancy like when you minimize window or whatever it was. Like it let us do the things we wanted to do. But I don't know why I stuck with the GNOME stack. I honestly, it's probably just a consequence of like I had used Ubuntu and been using Ubuntu for several years at that point, and like Elementary started as an Ubuntu skin or spin or whatever you want to call it to start. You know, we would have been very offended in 2010 if you called it that. But like
a flavor.
That's how it started. Well, yeah, we were never a flavor, but yeah, that's it. That's how it started, right? It was a skin. It was a theme. It was an icon theme and a GTK theme. Then it was the apps. Then it was an OS. Like, but it was Ubuntu. As soon as you stopped touching the user interface, it was Ubuntu. Like as soon as you opened the terminal, it was Ubuntu. It was just Ubuntu. Like people would ask us, like, "Oh, I love Elementary OS. I want a server OS. Like, what would you recommend?" And or like, you should make a server OS is what they tell us. And we're like, somebody already does that. It's called Ubuntu Server. Like literally, you take the user interface off of it, and it's just Ubuntu Server. Like, so just use that. Like, it's fine. But yeah, so I don't know. That's probably part of it. It's just like we came from the Ubuntu world. We built on Ubuntu and GNOME technologies, so we just used GNOME technologies at the time, and then it was, you know, when I started meeting people making GNOME, like it just made sense to be like staying in that world. You know, and I did play every once in a while, like when I got a Pinebook Pro and I used Manjaro with KDE, I think was the default for a while, and I don't know if it still is, but like I used KDE for a while on that, and I was like, it's always interesting because it's like, oh wow, this is almost like the first time I used Linux because everything's different, and then you know, it's like, okay, well, I miss the thing that I'm used to, so I just go back to what I wanted. That's GNOME or Elementary or yeah, I think it's just a consequence of where the Elementary people came from, and then where my interest stayed, and then meeting the people. At System 76, when Ubuntu actually announced or Canonical announced that they were ceasing Unity development and that they were going to switch back to GNOME. So this was 2018.
That sounds right.
Somewhere around then. I was working at System 76, and I think at the time I was working as a web developer, or I had maybe just recently moved over to doing UX at System 76. And like that kind of shocked System 76 because like System 76, at least at the time, was the biggest Ubuntu only OEM, if that makes sense. Which is like, you know, caveat, whatever. But like they were, you know, they were the only company who just sold Ubuntu at the time. Like that's all they did, and they did 100% Ubuntu. And so it was kind of shocking to be like, oh, I guess Canonical is completely changing what Ubuntu is, and that's going to like change the user interface for all of our customers at System 76. So there was like this like impromptu meeting at the bar, the floor below the System 76 headquarters, where we were like, what are we going to do about this? And
So that would have been around Pop OS then, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So you know where Papa OS came from now.
Yeah.
So at the time it was, what do we do? Do we ship Ubuntu? Is somebody going to fork Unity and keep it going? Are we going to ship that? Because that's what our customers are used to. Are we going to keep shipping Unity? Are we going to ship, Ubuntu GNOME, but style it? Because at the time we thought they were going to ship it exactly like GNOME, like stock GNOME. That's kind of what it sounded like. So like, should we use GNOME to build a Unity-like interface? Which ironically is what, kind of ended up doing with Ubuntu Desktop. But should we switch to Fedora? Should we switch to this? Like, there were talks about, should we switch to Elementary OS? Like, should we switch to Elementary OS and invest in its development? Like, there were interesting talks being had. And eventually the idea was,
I
like,
wonder who tried to start those talks about Elementary.
Not me. Honestly,
not
me. I'll say no. Carl is a big fan of Elementary. I think Carl probably still is a big fan of what we did at Elementary. Like he let me. I mean, I worked at System 76 full time, and he let me spend a lot of time and effort doing Elementary stuff. Like so, I think he had a lot of respect for what we did at Elementary. But I mean, it was an idea that was floated, right? Like at one point, the imaging servers at System 76. Usually, it could be Ubuntu LTS or Ubuntu latest. Those were the two options on imaging server because that was in production. At some point, there was Ubuntu latest, Ubuntu LTS, Fedora, Elementary OS, Debian, and like probably two other things. But like Elementary OS was on that list, and it was considered. But at the time, it was actually the main factor, at least what I was made aware of, was that Elementary was based on the LTS release cycle, which at the time, like, would mean that it was too old for new hardware, basically.
Right.
That's since gotten better since they do like the hardware enablement backport stuff. But at the time, it was kind of like, oh, well, we can't really do that. But yeah, Pop OS was born. But it made sense. Like, I think with my experience working on Elementary OS and the GNOME stack there, plus engineers at System 76 who had worked on Ubuntu stuff, like, it made sense to be Ubuntu based. It made sense to be GNOME based. Like, that was the legacy, right? Like that was where we came from. And so I think it's similar with a lot of these projects that you see that come out and they're Ubuntu based, or GNOME based, and like, or both. And it's like, well, Ubuntu was a lot of people's first real Linux OS, right? Like, so you get a lot of these people who are like, well, I want Ubuntu, but I want to tweak how it works, or I want to change something about it. And so you start with Ubuntu.
Right.
It makes sense. Like, yeah. But, and then, yeah, I definitely think the reason I stuck around in the GNOME community even after, leaving Elementary, and like, it's because I had formed these relationships and I had gotten involved in GNOME design. And so like, actually I'm like way more involved in GNOME design these days, which is really cool. And Endless OS is GNOME based, which was a huge driving factor for me too. So yeah, it's just kind of like where the people I knew were and what kept me around. And I also I think like 5 years ago, I don't know if I would have, 5 years ago I was probably using Elementary OS, and like, I don't know that I would have liked switching to just stock GNOME. I probably would have switched to GNOME and then tried to make it work like Elementary OS. And luckily, GNOME has done all that work for me over the last 5 years. Like, you look at GNOME today, and it's remarkably more elementary-like than it was 5 years ago, right? Like, there's the dash move from the left to the bottom, and like the visual style is a little bit. I mean, it's actually maybe even like it's more flat than Elementary these days, but like has gotten a lot more modern, a lot more like, I would say, what's the word? Opinionated, I guess, in the design in a lot of ways, of like not just like the design of like options and things, but like the design of the actual like the visual design is a bit more opinionated. It's a bit more stylized, but like a lot of that reminds me of Elementary, right? Like we were always very opinionated from the Elementary side. So yeah, I think it was like 5 years ago. I don't know that it would have been using stock GNOME, and then these days it's really great. I really love the experience of stock GNOME. I think there's like one change I would make that I'm pushing for within the GNOME design team constantly, but I don't want to talk too much about. No,
fair enough.
It's a very nuanced topic, and nuance is hard on the internet. I have thoughts. Did you know that? Did you know nuance is hard on the internet?
Oh man, I've read my comments before.
I have so many things I could say. I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep my mouth shut on those topics. However, I think there is room to explore the idea of why so many OSs have a dock at the bottom of the of the screen at all times,
Mm-hmm.
and don't make you go into like an overview to have a dock.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying like GNOME should ship dash to dock or whatever, but like there's that nuance, right? Of like, I'm not saying like a dock solves all problems and like I think GNOME should have a dock, but in user studies that we do with different things, like it comes up often enough. I'm like, maybe a dock solves things that the dash in its current state doesn't, and like maybe we can do interesting things there. And like, I don't know.
Well, I was
That's
looking through
my one secret.
your GitHub. I did notice the uBlue Beyond thing.
Yeah, it's got dash to dock.
Yeah, it does have dash.
That's like the one change I make to stock. Or that it's not even the one, because I make a couple other changes that like are GNOME design things that we've talked about. So every week we have a call with like people who are working on design within the GNOME community. And one of these, like, I was inspired one day, George Castro, who you've had on here before.
Talked to him,
yeah. George reached out to me and he's like, hey, like, I don't even know. No, I posted, I'm like, you know what I would love? I would love if I could just make like my own vision for GNOME as an operating system. But like, I don't want to get into making an operating system because that's way too much work. I've been there, done that, don't want to do it. And George's like, there's this thing I've been working on called uBlue. You should come check it out. And so he basically roped me into making an operating system without calling it an operating system. So that's what Beyond is. But yeah, so we have these weekly calls. And so like my idea with Beyond was like, what if I take these things we're like talking about and saying like, could that work? Would that be interesting? And I just like shipped them. Just like warts and all, like ship them as is. And the idea is get a few of my friends using it, like I'll use it, and then we'll just like bang on it and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And like it'll be yet another data point, right? It's not like the solution for user testing. Like it's a terrible idea, but like it's just another data point to be like, hey, what'd you think of that? Like, did you get that update today? What did you think about those little, circles in the top left corner? Like, oh yeah, I was really confused by that. Or like, oh yeah, I thought it was really slick. Or oh, I didn't even notice it. Like, that's just more data points that are just helpful
what are
in
these
those
circles
design
in the
discussions.
top left corner?
Wait,
I don't have any clue. I just noticed.
So I think the screenshots of Beyond are outdated.
Okay.
That was, I think, an extension that I had configured to try to make it look like what is likely maybe what we're currently testing. I'll put it that way.
Right.
What we're currently testing for upstream GNOME. White screen on my screen, and it's like blasting my face out here. So there's the activities indicator. So I don't know if you've seen anything about that.
I saw that. I think it was mentioned a bit in one of Tobias's talks during Guadec.
Yes. Possibly. He talked about like. Yeah, he may have talked about it. Or there's a blog post about it too.
Yeah.
I think like OMG picked it up too and stuff. So
it's FOSS.
It's out there.
This indicator could just make GNOME's activities out of. Wait, that's a terrible title. Whatever.
Here we go. OMGLinux.com has GNOME devs may replace activities label with this indicator. Okay. And it's got a little bit of a write up there. But yeah, the idea is it's basically a workspace indicator,
right?
To replace the word activities.
Okay.
Because I don't think anybody has ever loved the word activities. And like in the original GNOME 3 designs, the overview actually did a lot more than it does today. I don't know if you remember or if you've seen original GNOME 3 designs, but it was like, there was this whole concept of this like document-oriented workflow, and then the people, like, it was like, we're going to tap into all the APIs of all the things, and we're going to have like your chat list in the overview, and we're going to have your recent documents in the overview. It was this whole thing. Like that was GNOME 3, the original idea. And it was radical and kind of crazy. And then it has kind of like been scaled back over the years because we've realized maybe actually this app-centric model makes sense instead of this document-centric model. And so we've actually like, the design has changed over the years, especially like GNOME 40 and beyond. But that word activities is a legacy from, I think, the original GNOME 3 designs.
Right.
Because it was all of your activities. It was all your activities, all the things you want to do on your computer. It had all your documents. It had all your people. It had all your conversations. It had all your activities.
But
And now
now
it's
it
like
basically serves as a workspace indicator.
it's your workspace overview, like
Right,
right?
right.
And then it's also how you get to your app launcher, right? So like it does basically those two things.
So this little three button.
Here's your workspaces. Here's your apps.
So the dot thing is basically the indicator for whatever workspace you're currently on.
Yeah. So the idea is it shows like if you have a fresh clean session would have the little pill as the current workspace you're on, plus it'll have one dot to the right because you always have an empty workspace to your right. So you can swipe over, use your keyboard shortcuts, and you can go over to that one. And then the little pill like blobs over, and then you have a dot on the left to show that there's a workspace over there.
Right.
And then as you add workspaces dynamically, more little dots show up. And so it kind of gives you this like persistent reminder of where you are. I mean, it's not a new concept. We've had like workspace switchers forever, right?
Well, yeah,
but like
I have a window manager right now. It just has numbers for each of the workspaces.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the little numbers and little squares or whatever. Like that's a thing. But like this is a way to make it almost like onboards people who don't use workspaces to the idea of workspaces. It gives them a persistent place to see like, oh, I see. I mean, a lot of people are used to that like pager type interface where like you swipe through things and you've got little dots where you are. And so it's like, what if we took that idea for the whole system? I don't know. It's an experiment. It may like we've done a small amount of like pretty informal user testing, and it was like I would say it was inconclusive, but it wasn't negative. It was from that informal user testing we did of like it performed no better or it performed no worse and maybe slightly better than the activities label. But also I think there's a lot of excitement around what we could do interesting dynamic things up there. Like
with the previous system, was there an indicator of which workspace you were on just like at a glance, or is it just
nope.
I think this having some sort of indicator is definitely it's definitely an improvement. The question is like, is this the best way to do that indicator?
Right. And then also does it also serve the purpose of to go there to get to all your stuff?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Because we've tried different icons over time of like, do you do like the little grid of like apps there? Do you do like do you do a search icon? But like nothing really felt like it really conveyed. Because like part of it is you can click that and then you can just start typing. So like search in a way would be a good thing there. But like it doesn't make sense to have a search class or a magnifying glass when it like goes into your overview of apps. So the idea was like, what if we did something? I mean, you look at like modern, smartphone interfaces and like the thing to get to all your places is this little line, right? Like that. Yeah. That's what gives you like your overview and that's how you get home is like this little line. It's really symbolic. It doesn't really mean anything.
It's just sort of like a marker to grab onto, I guess.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the idea of why it's like a pill. We had some ideas where it could be a wider pill. There's crazier ideas out there where what if we moved it to the bottom, or like if you look at the phone GNOME on a phone type UI stuff, like there is a line on the bottom. So like there is some ideas of like, could that be on a desktop? Could it be up there? Could it be in the middle? Could it be in the bottom? But like the first step is we know the word activities is terrible. Does this perform at least no worse than activities? Yeah. And if so, we should probably do it because we have this idea of a longer term vision of like more interesting things we could be doing. So yeah, those are what the little dots on that. And so I think my screenshot on Beyond is like outdated because I think it uses an old extension that didn't quite work as well. But that's the idea, is that it could be. And it could also be more dynamic and more interesting, like over time, if we actually go down that route. Like it could be like, I don't know. We've had lots of random thoughts. I don't want to like promise anything out there, but like it could be more interesting. Put it that way.
I definitely think it's like a cool concept for sure. Like I don't run GNOME myself. Like it's not my thing. I like the whole throw everything together with window manager nonsense. It's my desktop is a mess. Like, you don't know how much it's just pieced together and held together with tape.
But, I mean,
but it works. But
Legos are fun, right?
Yeah, that's definitely
reason
true.
We like Legos. Like you build something out of Lego blocks and you have a sense of accomplishment that you built it yourself too. So like I think there's that's totally a valid way to use a computer. That's fine.
Yeah. I'm not personally a fan of like the extra stuff that Ubuntu does on top of GNOME. Like I don't like the side dot. Like it's just.
Yeah.
I don't particularly whatever. I do like what vanilla GNOME is doing. It seems like it's coming along like really well. And I saw I did a video on the talk where Tobias was talking about the whole new concept for window management that I think is actually really neat. I don't know how it's going to really play out in the real world. It's going to be, there's a lot of really neat ideas that I don't know how you implement in a way that is consistent and actually operates like a user would expect it to. But
there's a lot of risk of unexpected animation or movements, and you gotta balance that. Yeah, for sure.
But I did see people being like, oh, if you're gonna do tiling, just do what Pop Shell is doing. But I don't think the idea of tiling is like a solved problem. Like there are absolutely problems with it, and I think if you want to experiment with trying to solve them in a slightly different way, like this is how we make progress. Like with the pill menu here, like we try it out. If it doesn't work, we try something different, and then maybe what Pop Shell's doing with tiling is just the optimal way that tiling works, or maybe it's not. Maybe there's something that that could learn from it, and we start seeing this new development of tiling that introduced this more. I guess the way I sort of looked at it was it's sort of respecting the size the windows want to be at rather than forcing a size upon the window.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the whole idea is that you would have, which mobile actually has this and does pretty well, because mobile used to have only, one size the window could be, and then as it scaled up to tablets, can use those hints. But the idea of this app can work well at these sizes or these dimensions, and so naturally when you open up another app next to that one, it might not make sense to say that should be a 50-50 split. You might be like, my chat window with a really long chat conversation, that could be a tiny little thing off to the side. So maybe by default, you open a window that has a big document in it, and you already have a little chat window open. Maybe it should just move that chat window over instead of being split it 50%. And so that's the idea, is we should explore that. And it's going to require a lot of work and a lot of buy-in from apps. Luckily, GNOME has a really cool app ecosystem these days. That's something else I couldn't really say 5 years ago. So it's really cool to see that we're in kind of a perfect storm of having a lot of really good progress on the desktop itself with performance and design wise. We're having a lot of really good results with the GNOME Circle initiatives, where we have these developers, independent developers, writing apps for GNOME. We have FlatHub, where you can distribute these apps. It's kind of this perfect storm of now we have an ecosystem. I don't know if you've been paying attention. GNOME is an ecosystem. It wasn't 5 years ago. It wasn't really. That's one of the biggest things I've heard from GNOME people about how they're inspired by Elementary too, is you guys get it. And you go back and look at blog posts from several years ago from GNOME designers and developers, and they're Elementary's building this thing, and they're doing it smart. Tobias, I think actually several years ago, had a blog post that's there are no operating systems, there are ecosystems. And he's Elementary is the only one that's doing it right. And this is several years ago. It's I would now say now there's at least two doing it right. GNOME is doing it right too, I think. Building all those puzzle pieces and bringing them together. So it means that you can do these more exciting things, right? This is why Apple can do whatever they want, because they know that developers will just fall in line. Developers and users will just put up with it. And to put it in a nicer way, I follow a lot of iOS developers and iPadOS developers on social media, and they are genuinely excited when Apple does something cool and new and exciting. To them, they're oh, this is so cool. I have a new thing I can do in my app. And we're getting that in GNOME now. We're getting when we do a new thing in Adwaita or in GNOME, developers oh, this is so cool. They rush to implement it. And that's super powerful. That means you can do things more interesting things with window management, and you'll actually have apps that actually do it. You can do more interesting things with a dark style, that just works on all the GNOME apps now, and people in the ecosystem are jumping on board, which is really powerful.
So you have this. Well, how much do you think? What I'm trying to say. How much do you actually read about some the negativity about GNOME? Do you pay that any attention, or do you just focus on we're doing cool things here? 'Cause, there's always going to be people that GNOME is forcing this on users. They're doing this. Libadwaita bad. Do you put any weight into that, or do you just like disregard it as people just, you know, not really seeing where Gnome's trying to go?
I have this problem where I am like a what's the word? I'm a terminal optimist.
Okay.
My wife says this about me. She's like, you're terminally happy and you're terminally an optimist. And like it actually could be a problem because like I think if I was more cynical, I could be like, I'm just gonna ignore everything ignore every comment section, and like I hear that from a lot of like GNOME developers or anybody putting things on the internet. Sure. Don't read the comments. It's like people hear that on YouTube, like don't read the comments. And I'm like, I think every time I'm like, maybe there's good stuff there, and sometimes there is, and that's what the problem is. Like sometimes there's like genuinely cool things in the comments, in between all the cesspool of, of everything else. And so yeah, I would say I try not to put too much weight on the tired arguments. When it's like, if somebody says GNOME hates users, I don't have time for that. Like, that's demonstrably false. Like, I think it's really sad that people get that impression because I see the people working every day and how much passion they have on like making a really cool system for people. And so like it makes me a little sad, but I'm like, I don't have time for that.
Right.
When I see people saying things like GNOME takes away options, to me, I'm like, okay, I also dealt with this from the elementary side for years. Like, I totally understand where you're coming from.
But there's additional context.
It's like, at the same time, like, adding every option to everything is unmaintainable. Like, you will end up with a system that is so complex that it's just bad. Like, like it is really hard to add lots of options to everything. It's an exponential increase in complexity. And so, and then at the same time, I would also point to, over the last like 3-4 releases, like the GNOME settings app has gotten new additional settings every release. Like there are like, and one of the primary people working on GNOME from a design perspective, like who's designing a lot of the setting stuff, has told me like my goal, it's funny because it's again, nuance is hard, but it's like my goal is to kill tweaks, GNOME tweaks or GNOME tweak tool. And it's like, GNOME developers hate GNOME tweak tool. And it's like, no, my goal is to kill it by pulling all of those settings into the app. All of the settings that make sense to live in the OS should just be in the OS. And so that's, if you look at the last several releases of GNOME, all the new settings are things that came from tweaks that are now integrated into GNOME. And like that idea is like, no, there are, when it comes to, if it's like hardware compatibility stuff or accessibility stuff, like there are really valid reasons why somebody has a strong opinion about how that thing works. Yeah. It's harder when it's like, I want my whole desktop to be like hot pink all the time, everywhere. And it's like, okay, that's a thing you can do with some things, but like, is that a thing we want to have, as an option and drop down in the settings? Like, no, probably. Because that's just, to make that work really well and have the standards of design that we want to have, it would be impossible.
Like, you can accent color. So, you can have hot pink accent.
I have a very long blog post about accent colors, and yes, I would love to have hot pink accent color in GNOME. That would be cool. I think that'd be cool. Elementary has accent colors. They have a bubblegum accent color, and it's very cute. But yeah, and so that's that again. Like, we're actually thinking about this really hard. It's not like I threw out that silly idea, but honestly, if you love pink and you are like, I want my desktop to reflect how I feel and how I want my thing to look, like, yeah, we know that. Like, we're working on it. Like, but we have this ecosystem of apps that we have to like pull along with us. We have user expectations that we have to pull along with us. We have like the corporate distros that are shipping GNOME, who we have to convince that this is a thing that they should invest development time into. Like, there are a lot of complicated stakeholders here. And so that's why, like, GNOME hates users. I don't have time for that because it's demonstrably false. But I also see where people are coming from when it comes to some of these ideas. Like, yeah, GNOME has had an opinionated look at design and what options are worth shipping because we know the reality of building an ecosystem and how complex it is. And yeah, then there's people who are like, no matter what you do, they'll just hate on you, and it's like that. I also don't have time for. It's like, it's just, so it's there's a spectrum of like what I will tolerate or like listen to or try to respond to. Like I probably respond to too much. I'll see something on like Mastodon or like hashtag gnome sucks. Like it won't let me do this. And I'll be like, well, actually you can do that. Also have a nice day. Like, please don't hate me. like I probably shouldn't do that.
My favorite is when people say something like, this can't, like, there's no way to do this. And you're like, did you, here's a page, tells you how to do it.
Did you look at the setting that says the words that you just said you can't do? Like, yeah. And so like it's a mixture. It comes back to, I think, a bit of what we were talking about earlier of like, I think a lot of people in our space have a problem with like marketing or showing off their work, or like the communication skills are hard. Like, it's really easy. It's really easy to be like, I've thought about this a lot longer than you, so you're stupid and I'm not going to listen to you. That mentality is really easy to have in your head. But when you're representing a project on the internet, you should probably keep that mentality in your head and use your words differently. Put it that way. Like, Alan actually had a really great talk at Guadic, which right now you have to scrub through the Guadic timeline to find.
We'll talk about that in a moment.
Share a link to that. But he had a great talk about managing like online communication, and there's this, and then actually Dylan McCall, one of my colleagues from Endless OS, has had a great talk about managing like upstream and downstream relationships. That was another great one that also touched on this idea. So there's this idea of wearing hats that we talk about a lot in like the open source world, of like, you have to be able to like put on your hat. It's like when you're working for a corporate, whatever sponsor, or working for a company who's investing in open source, like you have to put on your corporate hat sometimes and be like, okay, well, according to what my boss says, I should be saying this. But take that hat off and put my gnome hat on, I should be saying this. And like take that hat off and put like the end user hat on, which is, like, so I think the most successful people there, like it's a difficult communication style, but like you mentally put on the different hats. And so sometimes, like, if you're wearing a grumpy old developer hat, like maybe you shouldn't wear that hat when you talk to people on the internet. Like maybe you should put on the like public relations hat, which is hard to do, or maybe just don't talk to those people. But it's hard. It's really hard because I think this social media world we've grown into or had built around us, whatever how you want to look at it, like it can make for very toxic discourse, and like, but also it can be really cool. It's like, it's really easy to just dismiss it as like, don't read the comments, they're terrible. But then when I have like a really genuine full interaction on the internet with somebody, like it just brings me back. And it's just like I keep going back for those little interactions.
Social media is a really powerful tool it's allowed, like, just in my case, for example, like, there are so many people I've brought into this show that I didn't ever think I would, like, have a chance to talk to. Like, actually, this one's not confirmed yet, but I'm talking to him, so we'll see if he can come on. I'm talking to Daniel Stenberg, the developer of Curl. I'm probably going to bring him on at some point. I've got Glorious Eggroll coming on at some point.
Very
we
cool.
deal with that. Like, these are people that, without this ability to connect with all these people, I would never really have a chance to talk to them. Like, this is the power that it has, but because you have this certain level of anonymity, and this goes back to the whole, like, you guys acting like dumb kids to a repo, where there's not really a person you're talking to, like, in your head at least, like, you're talking
it's
to
an avatar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we hear that a lot in, like, I think Alan talks about that a bit in his talk, and like, that's, remember the people behind the project, right? Like, no matter if you use the project, an open source project, or no matter if you like what the direction of project is going, like, full disclosure, like, I've used KDE a handful of times, and like, personally, I've never stuck with it just because I'm like, oh, this is just different from what I'm used to.
Sure.
But like, if I met somebody working on KDE, I'd be like, oh, cool, how's it going? What are you guys working on? Show me what you're doing. Oh, this is so neat. Like I can separate the, like, I personally don't use this thing, or like, I personally don't, like, that's not my vision, from this is a person who's pouring their, like, passion into doing this thing for other people, especially in open source when it's for free and like giving it away. Like, they're doing it because they believe it's right, and they're doing it because they believe it's good. And like, yeah, it's just, to me, just like hating on any developer of anything just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't like click in my brain. But I think it is when you're like, those developers, with that username and that avatar, they suck because they didn't listen to my one thing or whatever. Like, I think it is easy to fall into that trap. So that's why, like, I think like video chat is so cool. Like, that is such a cool thing we're doing right now. Like, across the world, across time zones, across seasons, across hemispheres. Like, it's crazy. And then at the same time, like, those events where you can be actually physically in person are like so incredibly powerful. The bandwidth you have, that your brain has, connecting to another person's brain, is like unreproducible. Like, that's just like the only way you can get that amount of bandwidth of communication is by like being in a room with somebody and talking to them. And like that, it's hard with like, there's climate considerations for traveling and stuff. Like, we're talking about that with Guadek is coming to Denver next year, by the way. I'm based out of Denver, and Guadek is coming here next year, which is I'm really excited about. But like, there's just like constant nagging in the back of our head of like,
paddle over there.
It's like, it's so, there's so many people in the Americas, in North Central, South America, that haven't been able to go to, or it's been very expensive or very carbon intensive for them to go to Europe for Guadek. And so having it in somewhere more accessible to them is really cool and powerful. But it also means all these people in Europe who've been able to take a train either aren't going to be able to come, or they have to get on a flight. And that's like, it's hard, but it's like, I think it's important to like balance the two, because it is so powerful. Every time I've met people in person, it's really strengthened the like relationships, and that like, the camaraderie is not even like a good word for it, but it's just like that, like that connection with the person, the people. I think it's way too easy to forget that when you're behind just an avatar and a username. And like, there's like other considerations there too, of like, people have social anxiety, or like people like don't feel good about their body, or don't whatever, like, or have health reasons they can't travel, and like, so you have to keep that in mind too. So it's like really complicated. But I'm definitely of the opinion of like, if it's at all possible to make it happen, to get people in person, get them in person. But if you can't, like, if you can do some sort of real-time communication like this, it's such a different thing than just like hating on an avatar.
Yeah. For me, no matter where Guadek is, it's a bit difficult, because it's got like over $1,000 to fly there. Pretty much everywhere I want to fly to from Australia is like $1,000+, $2,000, $3,000. Like, that's not gonna happen for me.
Just we just need to find like a university in Australia or New Zealand or somewhere over in that neck of the woods. Well, and, like, just get a university that could sponsor it.
There's
a product there.
There's a PyConf that happens in Sydney, so there's that.
There you go.
But so for me, like, and for a lot of people, like, especially like, if it is gonna move to another continent, there's a lot of people that obviously will still want to watch that content, but the way that Guadek is set up, this isn't just a Guadek thing. This is a thing with every single Linux conf. It's a thing with a lot of conferences. I really don't like the way that a lot of them handle their recordings. Like, obviously doing a stream and having all of the talks recorded is great. The problem is now you have, let's go, how much is it? How many hours is it?
Like 8 hours or something ridiculous. It's crazy.
No, I mean across all.
Nobody has
across all.
Oh yeah, it's 3 days of talks that for like.
So 6 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours.
Yeah.
Let's just say
3
40
days of talks with 2 tracks. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's just say something close to like 40 or 50 hours. It's probably close enough to that.
Yeah.
I think the thing that really needs to be done is cutting out each of the talks into individual videos, because each of the talks, how long are each of the talks usually? Like,
either, I think it was a 20-minute slot or a 40-minute slot.
Okay.
So, 20 or 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So after everything is done, like, cutting them out into individual things, because that makes it a lot easier, not only for people to, who are gonna, like, maybe do, some sort of follow-up video like I would probably do, but it makes it a lot easier to share those interesting talks with people.
Like, link to that talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because you can always link to a timestamp in a 7-hour live stream, but
that's a bad experience for everybody.
Yeah. But
so you'll notice if you look on the Guadek like channel, so there's a Guadek YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You'll notice that there is a
is there dedicated
sorry, I started playing loudly.
Oh, it's on the GNOME channel.
YouTube. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's also a Guadek channel.
Is there?
Yeah, so maybe that's part of the issue. So there's like,
yeah,
because that's not where the Guadek 2023 stuff is. Interesting. I will let people know about that. Um,
Oh, so wait, so there have
so-
been clips at some point.
yeah, so I
Okay.
think 2020, somebody spent the time of like cutting the stream up into and like uploading them all and like tagging them all, and without promising it for sure, there was a discussion about this at Guadic.
Mhm.
I mentioned it in the Matrix channel we had for Guadic. I was like, hey, so how are we gonna put these on YouTube, right? Like, how are we gonna share these? Like, are we gonna cut them up individually? And there was like, oh yeah, we're working on it. So the thing to remember is like one, Guadic is like 100% volunteer.
Right.
So the people, there's like a local team who live in or around that area who do it, and then there's like a lot of times there's like a university who's doing it, and then like you may have paid like the company who did the recording for the day of, but like oftentimes it's not included in that contract to be like, okay, and you will also cut up all the videos later.
Right.
So a lot of times it's like somebody's just like, I'm sick of this. I'm gonna like download it with YouTube DL and like slice it in whatever app and like share them somewhere that then can be uploaded to YouTube. And like I feel like that's something like that may happen with the 2023 talks, but it would be nice if it was like day of or like part of the process, right?
Mhm.
So something we did with the Elementary Developer Summit that I basically organized and ran. It was a weekend or Elementary Developer Weekend. It was a 2-day, pretty short, like little online only conference, and it was happening in the midst of COVID and everything. But it was really nice to be like a first like dip your toes in the water of organizing a conference because we pre-recorded the talks, and that meant we could just upload them ahead of time, and then we live debuted them, which was really cool. It was actually a really cool way to do it. That's hard to do when you also have an in-person audience. But maybe you could do like, I know with streaming software you can like you could have start a new stream for each one, and then I think you can do the thing where it says it'll actually bump you over into the other stream after that one ends. Like, I think you could do it. I think it'd be a lot of setup, but you could do it.
OBS it is going to be a bit of setup, but OBS does have a thing to like stop record, like keep the stream going, and then I guess create clips from it. Like you can set up a hotkey to like this stop this recording, start another one straight away.
Oh, cool.
So it like automatically just like restarts it up for you.
So it jumps over to a new video.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we should just do that. I will, if you can share it. This is the beauty of open source. If you can share that with me in a chat sometime, I will share it with people who end up doing the recording for Denver.
I think it's just called split recording file, but I'll have to have a look at it.
I also know Georgios Strakis, who's his username, I don't know how to pronounce it right. It's something like Fenneron in a lot of places. He's a longtime GNOME shell contributor, GNOME design contributor. I know he also has been working closely with OBS over time. Like I think he maintains the OBS Flatpak or something. Basically,
he's a big reason why OBS is usable on Wayland.
Exactly.
He was the guy who got the port, like all the portal stuff, like linked in, did the upstreaming stuff. Like that's so the reason why it's even useful on Wayland.
This is where these in-person conferences are incredible. So I had met him in person or whatever at different things, but like it happened that one evening after Guadec, we had like a 3-hour heart-to-heart talk on a couch, because that's just a thing that happens sometimes at these conferences.
Sure.
So like he's like one of my favorite people in the world. I just want everybody to know that. Georges is amazing. He's wonderful. But yeah, it's just like, he's so cool. Anyway, so I'm like, I'll talk to Georges about this, and like, if you could send me that, and like, so I'm on the local organizing team for Guadec 2024 in Denver. And part of that's going to be, figuring out who's going to do the actual recording and streaming and everything. Like, they used OBS at the university in Latvia, which is really cool. So it's like, it's not that big of a stretch to be like, yeah, we could probably try it. Like, let's do it. So that'd be nice. Yeah, I agree. It's one of those. It's always hard. Like, streaming it is, takes a lot of hurdles in the first place to get like good quality cameras and all that stuff, and reliable bandwidth. And so I think some people are like, we streamed it. It's up there. It's out there. We're done. It's like, it would be good to make it better though. So I agree. Yeah, 100%. Those like,
it's certainly good that there was already some thoughts being done about it. Like, I'm happy that I'm not the first person to mention that this is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely not. I think we all know that it's like, because I think what happens is everyone who gives a talk, like the day after their talk is like, or the week after when they write a blog post, they want to link or embed video in their blog post, and they're like, "Oh, I have to embed a 7-hour video and include a
Yeah.
timestamp in that." And, I wish I could just do like. So I think everybody kind of knows it in the back of their minds, and so I think it's one of those things where we'll make it better. Yeah, it's good to know that if you can like just like jump over to a new clip, and if that actually is pretty easily usable on the stream side, that'd be nice.
Well, and just to, like there's always like the breaks between talks, isn't there, as well? Like there's like as you have like the talks, you have like the transition between the two talks is like some sort of break thing. Like during that segment, like if something goes wrong, you have like time to fix stuff up. So if it doesn't like restart it straight up again, you can be like, oh, okay, like do this, and just keep going. But and also if something does go really wrong, because the splitting the recording file is separate from the streaming, there's always going to be that stream backup anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You can record locally and have a backup. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it just requires like knowing what the requirements are.
Yeah.
From the start, and so we'll talk about it for 2024. Hopefully we can make it better. And hopefully I do think like at some point, whether it's like literally me just downloading the videos and splicing them up myself or crowdsourcing to a handful of people, like I think we could probably get that done. You know, it's a lot of bandwidth to be like, or a lot of bandwidth and storage to be like, I'm going to download this whole video and then splice it up and then like re-upload them somewhere on GNOME infrastructure. And like, there's like the logistics of that, but like, I know one Guadic, it was either 2018 or 2019. That was one of the BOFs. So these things called Birds of a Feather workshops that are usually it's like the first 3 days of Guadic are like talks, and then the next 2 days are workshops or BOFs. Because it's like it's not like an educational workshop. Usually it can be. It's why they're called BOFs and not like something more specific. It's where people, birds of a feather, flock together. You know, that whole whatever. I think it's kind of a terrible name, but it's kind of cute at the same time. So GTK, for example, always has a BOF. Right. They like it's where the people who are the actual like core maintainers and developers of GTK get in a room every 6 months or every year and just talk about the stuff when you're in a room you can talk about in person more easily. But then there's also a newcomers workshop where it's people new to the community can come and learn how to get involved. And so like it's kind of amorphous and it's kind of intentionally that way. One year, I think it was 2019, there was a like let's cut up the videos BOF. Like we're like, hey, we have an external drive with all the video footage. We're going to pass it around. Everybody copy it onto their computer. You take day 1, track 1. You take day 1, track 2. You take day 2, track 1. You take, like, and they did it. And that's why those videos are on YouTube. It was like, they just did it that week. And so I think that's also like, maybe we should build that in. Maybe we should put that on the schedule for Guadic 2024 is like, let's have a room full of people who have a halfway decent computer and can splice up a handful of videos and upload them and, get the titles and the descriptions copy pasted from the event site. And like YouTube auto-generated captions are not perfect, but they're better than nothing. Like you don't, because I think people think, oh, it has to be perfect. We have to caption it all. And it's like, yes, ideally, yes, everything would be perfectly captioned. But having it up with auto-generated captions is 100 times better than not having it at all. So yeah, I think there's ways you can do it in like a crowdsourced, like kind of almost guerrilla fashion of just like everybody just take a thing and just chop it up and do it.
If you wanted to actually do proper captioning, you would either need to pay some people or you would need to accept that it's going to take like a week or so depending on how many people are doing it.
Yeah.
Like
it's so long.
If the idea is just like, while 7 hours of footage sounds like a lot, because you have those clear breaks between, cutting it into actual sections, that would probably take. I could do that myself in like an hour, maybe at most. Yeah. It's then rendering it out again, then doing the titling. Right. That's the part that's going to take a bit of time. But the actual cutting, like, that's not that big of a deal, really.
Yeah, exactly. And people are talking about, oh, are we going to edit the audio? It's like, no.
No, just.
Like, yes, ideally, sure, that would be wonderful. But no, like, we're going to slice up what was there and we're going to put it up on the internet. And that's, I think doing it, like you said, like doing it like live where you can actually just switch to a new stream each time. Like if that works out nicely and
that
like
would streamline it a lot, definitely.
That'd be awesome because then it would just be there. And then you can trim up the edges if you need to at the, after the fact. But like, that would at least have everything would have their own video. That'd be awesome.
Mhm.
But even if you can't do that, like having the footage, like during those buff days and just splicing it up would be another way to do it.
Mhm.
So yeah, the conversations there. I think somebody's working on it. I'll check in on it too for Godot 2023, but definitely for 2024 we're talking about how we're gonna do it. So should be good. It's really hard to follow. I mean, I found this even so. The last Squadic I went to in person was 2019,
Okay.
and then 2019 I think was online only, and then I think or sorry, 2019 I went. 2020 was online only.
Mhm.
2021 I think trying to remember if it was also online only.
Mhm.
And then 2022 they had the first like in person one again, and I didn't go to that one because I had just had a kid, and so I'm not leaving a newborn baby and a 3-year-old at home alone with my wife. Like,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I tried to attend remotely, and like I still haven't watched all the videos that I want to because it's so hard when you're not there in person. Like when you're there in person, you can be like, oh, I kind of want to see this talk. Like let's continue that. You're having a conversation in the hallway or whatever. You're like, let's continue this talk after or this conversation after this talk, and like you walk into the room and you're there, and you're a captive audience. And like, but when you're like, oh, I have to take time out of my day to go find the timestamp and like sit down and watch it, like you're never gonna watch it. Or if it's hard to find, you're never gonna watch it.
Mhm.
But if somebody just shared it on social media and it was like, hey, this talk was great, and here's like the exact video,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll spend 20 minutes watching that video or
Mhm.
whatever. So yeah, I think it's a solvable problem, but it's also like you have to think of it from the start. I think you can't.
Right,
It's harder to do it if you do it afterwards.
There's one last thing I want to talk about, but I'll be back in just a moment. Every so often we mention you going from elementary over to endless, but oh, and I don't want to get into like why you left elementary. Like that doesn't really matter. But why is it that endless is the place you ended up at? Like, what was it about endless that made you want to go and join them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, say like originally, so back in 2015, I had a really cool experience at the Endless offices. And it wasn't the fact that it was Endless that made it a cool experience there, but like that's when I first heard about Endless was then. And then over the years, I've interacted with and met and hung out with a lot of people who worked at Endless. And so, I mean, Rob McQueen, like I remember at one of the Guadecs, we sat on a bus driving up when we thought the bus might have gotten stuck, driving up into the mountains to like a picnic at one of the after event things. They like chartered buses for or whatever. And like we sat on the bus and talked about Flatpak for like an hour or however long we were like stuck on the bus waiting for them to like clear the road for us or whatever it was. So like I sat next to Rob McQueen, and like he's a CEO of the Endless OS Foundation and also like president of the GNOME board, which is cool. Also just a friend of mine from the open source world. Will Thompson and I had hung out and talked over just random different times, and like and he ended up being my manager at Endless when I joined. And so like I think that was a big part of it. Was like I just knew the people. I knew a lot of the people. And like I knew them from their work in the GNOME world. I also have this like it's like slightly sarcastic, but there's like some truth to it of like Endless is secretly behind everything you love about GNOME. That's what I tell people. I'm like, and then like they start looking at it, they're like, actually you're kind of not wrong. But Endless has poured a lot of like development effort. I mean, so a lot of core GNOME maintainers a lot of Endless engineers are core GNOME maintainers for things like GNOME Calendar, GNOME Shell, like glib and like really low level stuff, and like or contribute a lot to just lots of different things like Philip Withnall, Georgia Stravakos, brain is totally blanking here, Will Thompson, and like they've worked on a lot of GNOME stuff over the years and are really integral in GNOME. And so like I knew them, but then like it's like, yeah, I want to be where those people are. Like they are not only are they doing good work, they're pushing GNOME in the right way, not like forcing GNOME, but like they're helping guide, I guess would be the way I'd say. They're guiding GNOME into a direction I think is a really positive direction. So a lot like the GNOME 40 changes, which like people thought was going to be super contentious and then was almost completely universally loved by everybody. Where like, hey, what if we had like a nice like workspace overview and like switched from vertical to horizontal and all this stuff. Like that was driven by user research and development from Endless. Endless has poured tons of time, both development and money into Flatpak and FlatHub, into GTK, into like what has become some of the core pieces of Adwaita.
Mhm.
Like a lot of the things that are making up this ecosystem that we have now in GNOME. Again, not to discount any work that anybody else has done. There's other companies, other people, individuals that have done incredible work here too. Purism is another one that comes to mind of like the focus on mobile that they've actually been pushing GNOME into a really nice like place now too.
Mhm.
But Endless has been there a lot too. Like Endless was the platinum sponsor of Quadec this year and possibly the last several years. Like Endless is frequently on that like sponsorship list. Endless has been on the GNOME advisory board, which is like a place where people come and like help shape Endless and help shape GNOME from our individual perspectives and like talk to other distros and things. Like Endless has kind of been behind a lot of that stuff. Again, not some secret cabal with some crazy like secret scheme, but more just like Endless sees GNOME as like the obvious choice for building what we want to build.
Mhm.
And so that attracted me to Endless too. It's like I had seen that happening behind the scenes and really like respected that approach to the work of like rather than just Endless OS, because Endless OS in the past and today they could like in the past they had basically their own completely custom distro with its own UI. It was built on GNOME technologies, but it was like a hard fork, super hard fork from what GNOME was shipping. But over the years, like especially now, like it's very close to upstream. There's like one extension that ships on the GNOME desktop, and then other than that, it's stock GNOME. And that extension reuses as much actual stuff from GNOME shell as it can, and like it moves some things around. Like it's as close as possible to upstream while delivering on the design vision that's there. But as far as like all the investment, if possible, it's all being done upstream. The end goal for Endless OS is that it's just stock GNOME. Like the idea is like shape GNOME in the direction that Endless wants it, and also like just Endless's ideas too in that direction too. So I think I like saw that happening and respected that work, and it was really exciting to be working directly in and with GNOME, the GNOME community and GNOME design. Yeah, that's the big thing. I think that, and then like Will, who I followed on social media because I just knew him from the internet. He posted a job posting, like, and this is when at elementary we were talking about like, what if we, what if we didn't take a salary anymore to like so we could pay some developers to work full time on these like very specific initiatives, and like, what in the midst of those talks, Will posted a job posting, and I was like, Will, did you write this for me? Because like haven't told anybody that we're thinking about doing it from the elementary side, that we're thinking about like taking a job elsewhere and working on this in our free time again. I mean, that's how we did it for years and years, right? Like we did elementary like that for a long time. It was very successful. But yeah, it was like, did you write this job posting for me? Because it kind of sounds perfect. And I talked to him a little bit. He's like, no, but like you should apply. It'd be great. And like, so we just like hit it off really well there. So I think that's like, that is twofold. Of like I knew Endless, I knew the people behind Endless, and I saw what they were doing, and then just also the time, like
the timing lined up perfectly.
Yeah, it just happened to be like perfect. So yeah, and it's really cool because it's like I had also been to thinking. I think I'd been to another GNOME Hackfest over the years, like representing System 76 working on Pop OS. It was actually the GNOME Shell Design Hackfest, which I would say is like the initial seeds of what became GNOME 40. And there were people from Endless there. There were people from Purism there. There were people from Red Hat there. There were people from System 76 there. And consequently, people from Elementary there as well, because I was kind of wearing both hats, right? And so, like, again, going to those things and seeing and meeting people in person and kind of being part of that. Like, I met Georges. I met some of the design people working on Endless OS. And, like, so I saw and respected what they were doing. Another one I went to, it was the Parental Controls and Metered Data Hackfest. Super terrible name, but exactly to the point, right? Of, like, there were two features that Endless OS had that they were like, we want to just upstream these, because first of all, that means we don't have to maintain them ourselves. And second of all, like it's more useful if more people use it, right? That spreads the impact as a nonprofit. Like Endless is a nonprofit, and so they're like, if we do this work upstream, it actually has a wider impact than if we just did it in Endless OS. So obviously, upstream is the right way to go.
Mhm.
So parental controls. So in like GNOME software, throughout the Flatpak, everything like all the and in GNOME shell itself, and then in GNOME settings, like all the way through the stack, you have to support this idea of content ratings, and that's where like the ORS content ratings come from, and so enforcing that on a technical level throughout the stack. And Elementary had actually done some interesting earlier work on that. And so we were interested in like collaborating with GNOME on like, hey, if we're both doing the same thing, let's work together on it.
Mhm.
So then I saw Endless had done all the engineering work on the actual thing that Elementary ended up using. So there was that there. And then same with metered data. So like when you connect, if you like tether to an Android phone, or if you have like a SIM card in your actual device, whether it's a phone or a laptop or whatever, like GNOME has this idea of knowing that your connection is metered.
Right.
And so it can do smart things with that. So like it won't do auto updates over metered data, or
Right.
maybe it'll reduce video call bandwidth over metered data or whatever. And that again, that came from Endless. The whole idea of Endless OS is like, expensive or, low quality or slow internet connections or no internet. And so maybe you only have internet certain hours, but it's really expensive. And so you want to make sure your computer doesn't just go wild when it has internet. And so now that's in GNOME, and like GNOME has that. And I saw that came from Endless. And so like I think just being exposed to that of like, oh, Endless is like has their fingers in all the really important places that are really cool, made it a really natural transition for me.
One last thing. What in the world is a
Yeah.
partner success engineer? Because that sounds like a made up job title.
Yeah, if you figure it out, let me know, because I have no idea. No. So the gist is like I like to call it the bridge between the engineering team at Endless. So
Right.
there's a bunch of engineers at Endless that like do the engineering stuff. And then there's these partner organizations who are out there in the world who might be
Right.
like nonprofits, they might be school districts, they might be governments that are like putting Endless OS in the ground.
Mhm.
So they're actually the ones who get a bunch of computers donated to them, or they buy them or whatever, and then they put Endless OS on them. And so I'm the bridge between those people and our engineers. That's the simplest way to put it.
Okay.
And so the bridge part, it's a two-way communication thing, right? Like I have quite a bit of a technical background, and I can speak engineer with the engineers, and so I can understand what they're talking about most of the time. Sometimes I have to ask them clarifying questions, but I can usually understand what they're talking about. And then I can kind of translate it into like what the totally non-engineer people on the other side
Right.
are would understand. And then, or if like the people on the other side are like, oh, we really needed to do this. This is almost where the user experience background comes in. It's like, well, they're saying they want this, but the problem they're actually having is this. So I'm going to tell the engineers this.
Yeah.
So it's like this two-way translation between what the engineers are doing and what the partners need. So as a nonprofit, we have a bunch of partners all around the world who are deploying Endless OS and other Endless stuff that we do to like tens of thousands of people. And so the only way that's scalable is like if we don't do it all ourselves. We're a relatively small company or a nonprofit, and like we rely on those people who are on the ground to be competent, and both competent but also like well resourced. So if they have a question about like, oh hey, I'm having a problem installing Endless OS, like it's not really like a normal tech support question. It's like maybe they're an IT person at a school district and they have a very technical question. So like it's kind of fielded through me, and if I don't know the answer, I'll find the right engineer who does know the answer. And so it's really that bridge between. And so it's like that's where it comes back to the partners. So it's my job is to make our partners successful while working with the engineering team. So it's like all the words make sense, but it's not a normal thing. Sometimes people hear like developer advocate, and like I also don't love that because it's super amorphous, but like that's similar to that. There's an aspect of like community management to it too, because I'm interacting with I'm representing the Endless OS Foundation when working with outside people and organizations and stuff, but it's not quite that. So yeah, it's kind of a customer success is a thing, but that usually kind of just is coded to mean support. So it's somewhere in between all of those things. But yeah, that's generally what it is.
When you said describing what the customer wants of the engineer, I just think of this image. You've probably seen a version of it, of the what the customer described. They described like a rope swing. Then what the
Yes!
engineer designed, and it's like this
So
rope
true.
swing where like it's tied between the two trees, but it doesn't actually move. And what the
Or
customer
like
actually
they saw
wanted.
off the
Yeah, yeah,
tree in
yeah.
the middle of the tree,
And what they
what they
actually
actually wanted
wanted.
was a tire swing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And so it requires that translation, right?
Mhm.
Like you have to not just take what the person says at face value, and you can't let the engineers go to their own, be in their own whatever
Yeah.
devices. Like you have to be there has to be somebody in the middle who can like put the pieces together and be like, they say they want this. I think what they actually want is this. Don't build that. Like this is what they actually need. And so it's a lot of that of like it is this weird like overlap. This is why like when Will posted the original job posting, I was like, did you write this for me? Because it's this weird combination of like customer interaction, technical
Right.
background, like Linux background, like some like communication stuff. It was like all these pieces. I'm like, this is weirdly specific. Like, swears it wasn't written just for me.
Well, I've taken up a lot of your time. It's probably getting pretty late there, isn't it?
It is getting a little bit late.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll end it off. So let people know what do you want to direct people to? Do you want to direct them to your website? Do you want to direct them to the GNOME project? Like, direct people somewhere.
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest place to find me and everything that I do and everything related to me is CassidyJames.com. So that links out to everywhere else. But yeah, I mean, if you want to learn more about EndlessOS, endlessos.org. You can find everything about the EndlessOS Foundation and the stuff we do. And then, yeah, gnome.org if you want to learn about GNOME and everything that's going on in that world.
Let me just say, your website looks really good. Like,
thank you. Yeah.
I need to remake mine. I realized that I know this one.
I have two friends in open source who have both, because my source code for my site's just out there. Like I have two friends who have taken my website and used it as a template for their own website. So it's there. It's possible.
Actually.
It's maybe a little complicated, but I tried to make it kind of a template. But yeah, I love. Yeah, that's where like my website is where I get to like play in my own sandbox of design where nobody can tell me no. So I do things that I'm like, this may be terrible. Like maybe the letter spacing is too small, but I love it. Like. So it's my own sandbox. So I'm glad that people like it.
Yeah, I have no idea about design. Like, look, people have seen my desktop before. They'd be like, "Wow, you have a great theme." Like, do I? I have a blue border around my windows. That's my entire theme.
Hey, sometimes simplicity is good too.
That's true. Is there anything else you want to direct people to, or is that about it?
I think that about covers it. Yeah. Again, like my website is where like you can launch off there and find social media and all that other stuff. I'm gonna read out a Mastodon handle on the screen. But CassidyJames.com, you'll find everything.
Easy. Awesome. As for me, if you want to check out my gaming stuff, that is over on Brody on Games on YouTube. I stream on Twitch and Kick as well. Go check them out if you want to. There's all linked to my site. There's really nice, useful links where it's just like Brody Robertson XYZ / whatever service you want to go to. That was a very simple thing to do, but it's made linking people places a lot easier than giving them ridiculous links with a bunch of random numbers in it. Right now I should be playing through Final Fantasy 16, and I think I'm still doing Portal 2 co-op with Ren, but this comes out in the future. I don't know if that's still going to be happening. We might have finished it by now. The main channel, Brody Robertson, I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. I don't know what will be coming out. Probably something. Hopefully it's not another Red Hat video, but there probably will be. I don't know. And this channel, if you're watching the video version, you can find the audio version over on pretty much any audio podcast platform. There is an RSS feed. Put in your favorite app. If you want to see the video version, it is over on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. So I'll give you the final word. What do you want to say?
Oh man, I wasn't prepared for that.
I never tell anyone. It's always fun when someone actually knows that I'm giving them a final word.
Yeah, and see, I've watched so many of these videos. I should have known. Should I throw out another spicy take? Is that a good ending note?
Sure.
That was a terrible idea.
Sure, go right ahead.
So nuance on the internet is hard. That's the preface. And it turns out that privacy respecting metrics are actually a good thing.
We didn't talk about that, did we?
We didn't talk about that. And I'm like, I can't start that conversation now. We'll be here another 3 hours.
Yeah, we'll have to do another one of these then.
We will. We can. I will just, for the tiny bit of context, again, not trying to like go any longer, but the tiny bit of context of like the perfect venue for these conversations is Guadec at the end of the day at a bar, and sipping a drink of your choice, where you're just like, all right, what do we actually think about this, everybody? Like, come on, let's just like open the can of worms, let's talk about it. And we actually had some super cool, valuable conversations there about it, and I'm actually feeling good about things. And
Okay.
like, I think all the people that are actually involved in things deeply respect privacy and like deeply understand that, and like they wouldn't run something on their own computer if it didn't respect their privacy. And at the same time, there are a lot of places where like you're flying blind when you're trying to design something and you just literally can't know certain things. So I think there's a path to mesh those two needs.
I'm sure that's gonna get some comments.
It's good. I like stoking the flames. It's fun.
It's fun. See you guys later.
All right. It's been great. See ya.